Okay, I'm gonna quickly ask you to give a short, brief introduction about you, how you ventured into styling, and how you've reached so far. Given the fact that you've been in the industry for a really, really long time.
Yeah, sure. I think my story, it's hard to keep it short because it's kind of scattered and all over the place, but I'll give you the short version. So when I was in school, I was always very academically inclined. I was the, 90 percenter and student of the year and a full nerd. And I thought that I wanted to be a doctor. So I studied science and, I did my 12th standard in science. I gave all of my medical entrance exams, the CETs and all of that. And I remember right before my CET results, I was supposed to, my mom decided to take me on a short holiday. She's like, now you're going to jail for 10 years with MBBS, so I might as well give you a 10-day holiday right before that. And the night before the flight, and I'm only telling you all of this because there's an end point to this, that everything happens for a reason.
Yes.
And the night before our flight to wherever, Malaysia, whatever, the travel agent who was coming home to drop our passports and our currency and all of that, he was robbed. And it felt like the worst thing that had happened to me. I was like, my passport's gone, my holiday's gone. And I called up my friends who were studying arts at the time. And I was like, guys, you have to entertain me now. I'm so shattered. My only holiday is gone, whatever. And they were all studying for this new course that Bombay University had just launched at the time. It was BMM, and I'd never heard what BMM was. I never knew the course content. And they told me, they were like, it's for like new age media jobs. If you want to work in television and news and film and, journalism, all of that, this is the course for you. So it was literally on a lark. They called me over. They said, can you help us with some of the arithmetic in the test? And the test was so basic for me. And it was honestly very thrilling to be able, it was like a slam book. Some of the questions were stuff like, give us 10 creative uses for a earbud. And I mean, I've always had a little bit of an irreverent comical side to me. So I was tripping on that test and I said, you know what, I'm just going to go and sit for this entrance exam in one of the colleges, Xavier's. They were writing the Xavier's exam the next day. So I went, I sat for the test, and then a few days later, my CET results and my BMM results both came out simultaneously. And I was first on the list in Xavier's. My score was the highest apparently, but CET was some mediocre score. I would have ended up going to some college in Nagpur or Satara or Sangli. And I was just like, I think this is a no-brainer. And I probably shouldn't fight the creative side of me, and I just signed up for BMM. It was literally done in a 3-day decision. And BMM, honestly, as a course, what it helped me do was, it just helped me keep an open mind, because there's no real structure or rigid planning or technical training really that happens. So for someone who's driven and who wants to do a bunch of things, which I was, I ended up doing multiple internships. I worked at newspapers, I worked at magazines. I did all of that throughout my 3 years in college. It was in my final year that I actually applied. That time, I remember Ugly Betty was like a rage. It was this huge show and we all were watching it all the time. So I said, you know what? And I was also a fat kid with no sense of style, with no appreciation or understanding of fashion really. So I said, you know what? If Ugly Betty can, I can. So I started sending out my resumes to like all of the fashion magazines. Condé Nast had just launched that year. And the only magazine that called me back for an internship was GQ India. And even in GQ, they were very clear with me. They were like, look, I wanted to write. I said, let me tell them I want an editorial position. I want to write. So they were straight up, they were like, we're not letting a 19-year-old undergrad write for this magazine, but you can get an internship in the production team and you can help our producer producing shoots. And that's where it started. I think I joined GQ. I started assisting the photo editor over a summer. And it was a fantastic experience, honestly. Beyond the glamour that you see in the magazine, there's just so much more that went into it. And it was during that internship that Arjun Bhasin, who was the then fashion director of the magazine, the launch fashion director, now he's one of the best costume stylists. Whoever doesn't know him, please look him up. His body of work is phenomenal. So Arjun actually spotted me in the middle of a shoot where I was, taking coffee orders or something like that. And I loved that job also. Getting everyone's coffee order right thrilled me, So I think he saw that sort of sincerity and that enthusiasm, and he just told me, why don't you switch departments and start assisting me? And if I like you and you like me and everything goes well, I'll hire you as a junior stylist for the magazine. And that's literally how it happened. It was a lark, like a kid who never thought about fashion. I didn't even know what styling was, what it meant. And this is 13 years ago. So yeah, I think Arjun, I owe it to him. So he gave me that first sort of break. And then I went on to work in GQ for 3 years, learned a lot. After GQ, I went to ELLE. ELLE magazine was actually like my fashion school because I never really had technical training. I never really studied fashion. But what I learned from Nonita Kalra, who was the then editor, from Mohan, who was my fashion director, Malini, Karuna, Chinmay, there was a bunch of really amazing people. And I think that was sort of the golden era for editorials too in India, in our market, if I may say so myself. But they were just fantastic, talented, great mentors, you know. So I think ELLE for me was that sort of space where I understood how publishing works really. I understood everything from the fashion department and how that needs to function, editorial and features, production, art, and of course the realities of ad sales and marketing, because we also did the events ourselves, you know, we did all of that. So ELLE was like my fashion school for 3 years. And after ELLE, I moved on to Femina. I was fashion editor there for about 2 years. Again, a totally different side to the business. It was more mass market. It was more commercialized, so to speak. Taught me a whole new side. The snobbery of luxury fashion and the Dior's and Gucci's and Fendi's, which I'd only seen for the last 5 years, suddenly went away. I was like, okay, now the reality is FBB and Biba and Soch, and that's what your market is. So let go of the ego and understand the ground reality, you know. So Femina taught me that. And then, of course, my last final full-time job was with Harper's Bazaar Bride, for which I moved to Delhi. Again, eye-opening, extremely important 1 year of my life. It was short. I wish I was there a bit longer, but it's what, I mean, I kind of understood Indian couture. I kind of saw the importance of the bridal and the jewelry market there. And it sort of just trained my eye in a very different way than I had been, you know, working all that while. So yeah, 2016 Jan is when I moved back to Bombay after that 1 year stint in Delhi. And I've been freelancing ever since then. I'm with an agency now, a talent agency called Inega. They sort of manage my work. And right now it's honestly a mix. Just do what comes my way, whatever I think sparks joy. And when I feel like there's a purpose to me beyond this job, I just take that on. So yeah, that's kind of been my lengthy story so far.
Thank you so much, Divyak. There's a little thing for the students, guys. He comes from a very different background, like he just mentioned, and he's Divyak, when we were discussing, mentioned that he's more than happy to answer all your questions on how you enter the industry and how you sustain in it, because he's been in the industry long enough with editorial and commercial to understand how the industry works right from the very, very foundation. So we have a couple of questions that we've listed, which we'll shoot. But if you have anything that comes to your mind while he's speaking, please feel free to put it down in your chat box and we'll moderate that towards the end of the session. Gauri, I'll leave the next question up to you.
Sure. Divyak, first and foremost, do you recall some of your first ever campaigns? What was the experience like and what were these campaigns about?
You are specifically asking about commercial campaigns or magazine shoots?
Okay, so this makes it even more interesting. How about you take us through both?
Okay, lovely. I think what I try to stress upon when I meet, you know, young students or, you know, just young people who want to break it into styling, especially because a lot of the 25 and under kids today, their only source of information and exposure seems to be Instagram. Whereas I come from a time where there was no Pinterest, no Instagram, where referencing meant you actually sat with a stack of 50 magazines and looked for references. But there are many, many aspects to styling and many, many avenues where you can sort of work as a stylist. So editorial, of course, that's publishing, that's magazine, that's one aspect of things. When we talk about commercial styling, we're talking of advertising work primarily. So television commercials, print ads, all of the hoardings you see when you drive down the street. There's, of course, celebrity and events styling also, which I think is probably the most popular because it's also the most visible. And everybody and their mom wants to be a celebrity stylist these days. There's that. And then, of course, there's shows and there's runway styling. So, you know, doing runway shows for Fashion Week. That's also one avenue. So there's all of those different platforms. And I think what is very important for anyone who wants to break it in this industry is don't write off any of these avenues at the very start. It might seem very glamorous when you look at celebrity stylists' Instagram profiles and you think that that's where you need to be because, you know, that's where the popular numbers are and that's the girls who seem to be the most glamorous looking. But it's important to try everything out because that's the only way you will know what you are temperamentally suited to. Because each of these avenues has very distinct skill sets. I mean, not everything is just about putting great looks together and, you know, having big numbers on Instagram. That's the last thing you should be thinking about, you know, when you start in this field. But yeah, I think that those are the many avenues. I've primarily worked in now 8 years in editorial and about 4 years in commercial styling. So yeah, for me, I kind of now found that balance. I kind of know the jobs that, you know, interest me, where I have a skill set that I can apply to this job, as opposed to just going through the motions and putting clothes together just for a check, you know. So yeah, I think that's sort of the breakup of the different streams.
Right. And just to kind of bring you back to the question that I previously asked, if I may, do you recall maybe the first campaign that you did with GQ? Let it be editorial or commercial or whatever. But do you recall any of those first few experiences, and if you could share them with us?
Yeah, I think, you know, with magazines, and especially with GQ, having worked with somebody like an Arjun Bhasin, what I sort of learned and was ingrained in me very early on was the fact that fashion is not just about clothes. I think when I was 19, that was made very clear to me by the people I was working with. Fashion is not about, you know, beautiful clothes that you make beautiful outfits with and then you take fab pictures for likes. You know, that's never been my approach to the job. I think styling as a profession also has to be a little bit more than that, especially for the nerd in me. I don't think I would ever be satisfied if my job began and ended with trends and clothes and outfits, you know. I think the clothes were always used as a means to tell a story. But especially when you shoot magazines, I think the base sort of rule is that you're chronicling the times we live in. That's the job of a lifestyle or a fashion magazine. You know, the magazine needs to reflect the mood that people are in right now, how society and culture is evolving, whether that's the clothes we wear or the music we listen to or the films we're watching or the people and the women and the men that we sort of admire in our current times. So that was always the sort of baseline. So whenever we put together a fashion story or whenever we are sourcing clothes or, you know, just sitting through fashion weeks and thinking about the trends that are emerging, there was always that lens of what is this saying about who we are as a people right now? What is this saying about the culture that we're all propagating, you know? Right. And I know it's, for a lot of people, it sounds a little bit romantic and over intellectualized, but that's for me what styling and fashion has always been. It's sort of an element that expresses, you know, what you are about in totality, you know, like it's a form of expression. It's just how you tell stories. You use clothes to tell stories. So storytelling is basically the most important thing. So that's what I started out in GQ. And I remember actually quite distinctly, my first day on set was with Arjun styling. I was assisting him, and it was a suit story. I mean, every menswear magazine does their annual suit story where they put in all of their advertisers and they need to feature XYZ brands and they need to put in these 12 suits into a fashion story. But what Arjun did, and this was way before it was cool to be real and to feature real people, I think he just sort of sought inspiration from everybody on the set who was not in front of a camera ever. So whether it was a spot boy, whether it was the boy who was serving us the tea, whether it was the dress man and his tailor and the assistant, he just sort of picked out all of these interesting men and he decided to put the suits on them and just give them a clean, like gray canvas backdrop where they could just be themselves. If that meant having a cup of chai and interacting with the photographer, or the two of them having a conversation while pictures were being taken. And for me, that sort of process, it just made everything so much more of value. You know, it suddenly wasn't just about that Alfred Dunhill, you know, checked suit that we're going to write a little blurb about to please an advertiser. It became a lot more than that. It became about capturing a moment between, like a real moment between these two men who otherwise wouldn't have this platform, you know, they wouldn't have this chance to sort of be talked about or be showcased. So I think that was for me one of the most memorable shoots, where I didn't just see fashion as something to put on a celebrity or someone who's glamorous, who has all of the money in the world. It's just a form of expression for each and every one of us beyond just functionality. So I think that was my first, like, assisting gig, at least, that sort of stayed with me, you know.
Thanks, Divyak. Gauri's facing a little Wi-Fi issue, so she's gone off. Okay, the next question we have for you is, so just concentrating on editorial styling as of now, the whole shoot, the whole process of a shoot. Now, a lot of students here in the chat today are from the styling background, but we also have students from the other departments, design, luxury brand management. I would like you to just introduce on the whole process of how the shoots work. Also, if you could highlight on the difference on how it used to be when it started to how it is right now.
Okay. In terms of, typically how I'm going to talk about BC, before Corona, because that's what I know. But yeah, so in the pre-virus days, how typically editorial shoots or how the styling department in a magazine would work is you plan your issues and your stories 6 months ahead of time at the start of a season. So Fashion Week was a very big starting point and a sort of stimulus for us to get that plan into action. So, you watch all of the shows, let's say we're at a fall winter show for Fashion Week, you've seen international shows, whether it's Milan, Paris, London, you've seen your Indian shows, Lakme, Wills at that time. And that's where you sort of understand the mood of the season, you understand the message designers are trying to put out beyond just trends, beyond the fact that red is a very hot color and pantsuits are in for women. And that is, of course, just front of book pages, where you're doing your shopping pages, you're telling the consumer what will be available in stores. But largely what you're sort of understanding and gauging is the mood that you want to set and the template that you want to build for the next 6 months of issues. And then, of course, everyone in the department, there's a hierarchy from a fashion director who heads the team to the fashion editors who work under him or her. And then, of course, there's a team of stylists and junior stylists, assistants and interns. So everyone sort of gets divided responsibilities. When you get a shoot of your own to style, whether it's a fashion shoot or a cover shoot, long story short, you pick the trend that you want to focus on, or you pick the story that you want to tell, and then it comes down to brass tacks. So we reach out to all of the multiple designers or the stores or the accessory brands that we want to sort of feature and put together looks with. Again, very important side note, a huge part of the job, which we don't really stress on enough, is the admin and the logistics. So being creative is all well and good. It's something that you have to be successful at this job. But to really be able to sustain this job, you really need to have great organizational skills and administrative skills. Because on an average for, say, a cover shoot with an actor, I would be calling in no less than 15 to 20 designer couriers. So there's that many boxes of clothes that are coming into the office. There's that much of inventory that you need to catalog and you need to make a list of. Then we put all those clothes up. We spend an entire day going through the clothes, putting together tentative outfits. Then you go to a fitting, ideally, with your actor. And then, of course, once the shoot is done, you have all of the returns procedures. You need to make sure things are packed and intact before you send them back to where they came from. So that entire process of logistics is actually where you start. It's the first thing you'll do when you enter this profession, and if you hopefully, reach a certain place in life, then you'll have a wonderful team doing that for you. And you can then just focus on the creatives, of what story you want to tell with these clothes. So yeah, that is pretty much the sort of brass tacks of how the shoots happen. And then, of course, within the magazine space, there's a whole bunch of other stuff you do. You're working on pages, you have to work on digital stories as well. You're putting together events and guest lists and, attending all of these functions and shows. So yeah, there's that whole gamut of work that it entails, when you work in a magazine. Your second part of the question was how you think this will change? Sorry.
Yes.
Oh gosh, that is I really don't know if anyone is really equipped to answer this question. I think the most important thing to accept and acknowledge right now is that the old systems are pretty much redundant,
Right.
Whether it's, something as simple as Fashion Week going digital now, and, a city like London, a fashion capital like London, declaring it online and, having no men's and women's separate shows and all of that. I think it starts from there. Like, even when I was telling you the process of how to do a shoot, it started with Fashion Week, but now even Fashion Week is not what we knew it was,
Right.
So I think there's a lot of introspection that needs to be done, and on not just on a macro level, where we're always sort of blaming the Amazons and the H&Ms and the fast fashion businesses of the world. And Of course, that's a huge chunk of the change, and there's a lot that needs to be talked about there. But I think on an independent level as a consumer, and of course, as industry professionals, what we do as opinion leaders, what we choose to curate, edit, and put out there, I think there's a lot of reevaluation that we need to do. Most days I'm very hopeful, and I look at this whole situation as a huge opportunity rather than just the crisis for what it is. I think this is the time for us to sort of figure out ways and means to do right by, all the kids that are planning to join this industry. They've been brainwashed into this, more is more kind of culture, and they've been brainwashed into believing that everything is about the big numbers and, becoming an influencer and owning all of these clothes and wearing all of this makeup. And I think a lot of them believe that to be the way it should be. And I've never been of that opinion. I've never played to like big numbers and, more is more. So I think that sort of, there's many ways that needs to change. I have lots of ideas. I don't know what will actually end up panning out, but yeah, I think just general reevaluation is what's needed right now. In terms of how it is already changing, and a lot of magazines and publishing is already making a shift. Of course, there's no two ways about the fact that technology is going to play a big role. Right now, Instagram is probably the most, the common denominator that everyone sort of looks at content on. If I have to be a little bit controversial and almost blunt, I think most Indian magazines are doing a very poor job of adapting. It's clear that they don't really have the answers, but it's unclear to me why they're not just pausing and just figuring out how to put out content that's of value rather than race each other to just sort of have any actress who's willing to do a shoot at home, or any illustrator who's willing to draw something, or anyone who will make a DIY mask. It's not just about racing each other for content and numbers, I think. Some magazines are, of course, doing some interesting things. Things like FaceTime shoots, which are encouraging people to be creative in their own spaces. I think, that's quite interesting to me. I also think a lot of conversations around what sustainable fashion really means rather than just being this buzzword that everybody throws around. I've been watching a lot of interesting chats of that nature and learning so much. So I think those are the kind of conversations that publishing needs to have, and use this as an opportunity to almost revisit how we were pitching fashion magazines, where the same 6 actresses would wear the same 6 luxury brands because they were buying ads in your magazine. And, you're just sort of, you're not creating any value for a consumer or a reader. There's nothing in it for me after a point. Only the fan clubs are going nuts, reposting actresses' pictures, So yeah, I think this is that opportunity where, whether it was Vogue putting women doctors on the cover, Femina and Vogue did a cover like that, which I thought was so fantastic. I'm like, that's the job of a fashion magazine, chronicling the times we live in, not being tone deaf. Not to name names, but there are magazines that are putting actresses cuddling horses and eating creamy desserts and talking about finding joy. And I can't resign myself to looking at that when the headlines next to that are that migrants in our country are walking home, and 90% of India's workforce does not know where the next meal is coming from. I don't want to be seeing XYZ heroine eating a creamy dessert and cuddling a horse in a farmhouse in Pandit. I find that offensive. Yeah. So I'm not to blame anyone. I know everyone's trying their best. But I think a lot of introspection is needed, and we need to probably shift to the more philosophical approach of fashion as opposed to the consumerist approach in fashion. It's not about selling products and trends to people, but rather telling stories using the tools we have. That's the change I'm looking to see.
Right. And before we move on into the next question, which is how students can actually start working on the digital medium when it comes to editorials, I'd quickly request you to just go back once into the realities and throw some light on things like advertiser support, low budgets, low salaries, barters. How do these things work?
Right. So I think another thing that probably not a lot of students know is that very few fashion jobs are going to pay you big money. Most people who work in fashion do it for the love of the art and the craft. And very few people really end up making big bucks. In fact, a running joke when I worked as a stylist in magazines was always that magazines only hire rich girls because they're the only ones who will never ask for an appraisal because they're not doing this job for the money, And that is a very, very sad reality. And it's probably only gotten worse since my time, the salaries that a magazine would pay us were not sustainable. If I was being paid enough money, I would very much like to have continued working in a magazine. But as someone who lives by themselves and has to pay rent and has overheads and bills, I would not have been able to sustain that if I continued working in a magazine. So that's one reality for anyone who's looking to work for a magazine. Please make sure that you're comfortable financially and that your salary is not going to be the only thing you depend on to sustain yourself, because a magazine is not going to fulfill that, not even at the highest rung. Like right now, people are taking pay cuts of 40% and more in a lot of these magazines because of the COVID-19 crisis. But it was pretty bad even before. So I can't even imagine what it must be like right now monetarily. But don't work in a magazine and think that that's going to sustain your bills. It's not. You're going to be doing it for the love of the business. And if you're privileged and lucky enough to not work just for money, then that'll be a good place to start. So yeah, that is number one. Secondly, magazines have been struggling in India for the last almost, I would say, 5 years, maybe a little bit more, because there is not that much interest and visibility in them. I think in India, people got smartphones in their hand before they got a hard copy of a magazine. And the bulk of the population here does not relate to intellectualizing fashion. That's just what it is. There's very few people like me who look at a Fendi coat and who imagine a story in our heads. For most people, they're just like, kitne ka hai? Saste mein kahan se milega? Where do I buy this for less? That's just the reality of the situation. So people are looking at their smartphones and they're not really consuming magazines. I mean, a magazine as large as Vogue India, which is probably the most popular one in our market, their readership figures are probably what they declare, a lakh maybe, and we're a country of 1.3 billion. So if you do the ratio, just 1 lakh people are looking at a magazine in a country of 1.3 billion. So very few brands really want to invest money in ad space then, because they're like, I'd rather just give this t-shirt or this handbag or this bag to an actress or an influencer on Instagram, and I'm going to get that many more eyeballs. So yeah, that's one struggle that magazines have to deal with, is that the big numbers is not something they can provide. And it's a vicious cycle, right? Because the minute you're not getting that financial support from big players in the industry, you automatically don't have the resources to then pump it into creating content. So automatically that means your budgets are reduced. You're not able to shoot at locations that you would otherwise like to, because flight tickets are expensive and visas are costly, and taking an actress with a battalion of entourage is not monetarily feasible. So the reduced budget along with the reduced advertising, that just goes hand in hand. And you have to be far more crafty. And I think this is now going to be even more important, because budgets are going to be cut across the board. It's not just for publishing. I think across the board in fashion jobs, in styling jobs, we're not going to be looking at the kind of salaries that we were getting earlier. There's going to be fewer jobs, fewer opportunities. And probably it's not the best news to hear, but only someone who's been established and been around and been tried and tested, they're probably going to be vying for those few and far apart opportunities. So yeah, I think with magazines, that becomes the big challenge. So another thing that they have to resort to then is a lot of paid content, and they don't even declare that that's paid content. Unlike in Instagram, where you can write paid promotion for XYZ. In a magazine, they'll very often charge a brand to be featured on the cover. They'll put that dress on an actress. Brand gives them X amount of money, and then they use that money to basically just cover cost. The money that they're getting to put those images out there, they have to pay their salaries with, they have to pay production costs with. So it's not easy. I completely understand the struggles and the challenges. And fortunately or unfortunately, I think the time I stopped working in magazine is when it really started to go down the drain, at least the print editions. But yeah, so I think that's a huge challenge that they were facing before COVID, and I don't know what's going to happen now post. I think they just need to be very wise with their digital strategies, because that's probably going to be the only way to make money, right?
Right. And for our students, how do you suggest they can adapt to the editorial form of the digital medium? How does it work? Like if they're creating content, how do they adapt to this sort of bringing it out digitally now?
Right. I think for anyone who wants to work as a stylist, like I said, the nerd in me refuses to accept that this is only about outfits and clothing. I think the first thing that you need to do to equip yourself to be a good stylist is hone your observation skills. It's literally about what you're seeing, what you're consuming, and not just with regards to looking at runway shows or looking at designers' work or looking at who wore what, that's a tiny fraction of what needs to take up your headspace. That's brass tacks industry stuff. What you need to know and understand is what's happening in the world in general. Listen to the right kind of music, listen to artists who inspire you, look at artwork where the colors and the textures and the composition, stimulate something within your head. Watch the right kind of cinema, just keep your information sources, quite rich. I think don't just be bogged down with which actors go what when, because that sort of will spin around in your head what you'd like to create. And then it becomes a little bit more clear to each individual content creator what they like to put out there. Because if you're just being fed on a diet of memes and red carpet pictures, there's really nothing that you're enriching your skill sets with. There's nothing you're inspiring yourself to create originally, Whereas like for me, even when I look at, like I remember doing this one beauty shoot for ELLE recently as a freelancer, where they wanted to sort of talk about the beauty rituals of Indian women, like things like chandan on the face and hair oil in the hair and those sort of, in like indigenous to Indian culture beauty hacks. And I just visited this art gallery and art opening, which my friend had organized, which had a lot of Indian artists' paintings where they featured a lot of women. So whether it was a T. Vaikuntham, whether it was an Amrita Shergill, whether it was a whoever, like Raja Ravi Verma, I think just looking at those paintings sort of struck an idea in me that we could just sort of do a 2019 revisiting of these paintings and these artworks and weave in the beauty aspects to it, whether it's a backless woman in a Ravi Verma painting washing her hair by a river, that could have been interpreted as, applying the oil, or whether it was the women with yellow and orange faces in T. Vaikuntham, that is your chandan and your haldi,
Right.
So I think that would not have happened if I had just been fed a diet of Pink Villa fashion and high heel confidential. I would not have ever known that that's something I could have done. So that's why I keep stressing on the fact that don't just consume clothes and don't just look at fashion content. So that's step number one, be observational, look at everything around you, listen to all the music, watch all the films, look at all the art. Just enriching your own personality. Then of course, once you have your ideas, once you sort of know what you'd like to go about, I think one very, very important step one is always assist. Work with stylists or creators whose vision you like. Don't just sign up with them because they have 500,000 followers on Instagram. Sign up with them because you've really looked at their work and you look at it as something that you'd like to learn from or you'd like to contribute to. That was always, I've been lucky that I got to work with some fabulous stylists throughout my career when I was assisting, and they sort of taught me so many things. Everything I know today is because of the influence they had on me. So yeah, start working with people whose work you look to and admire. Not all of them are going to be very popular on Instagram. So do your research, look at all of their work, understand the stylist whose aesthetic you appreciate, and just reach out to them. Again, very frankly, assisting is not a lot of money. When you start out as an assistant stylist, you're probably not going to be paid more than, 10,000 rupees for an entire 2 weeks of work for one ad. And that's in a best case scenario, where the client has the budget and can afford to pay assistants that kind of money. So it's not going to be a lot of money starting out. Eventually, if you're good at what you do, if you put in the hard work, if you sustain in assisting for at least a good couple of years, if not more. I assisted for almost 4 years before I got my own independent shoot in a magazine. I think assisting is a very important way to do that. Also, more than aesthetic, you will also learn procedural things. You will learn how someone needs to go about doing the logistics of the job, how you go around stringing a rack of clothes together, how you write an email or have a conversation with a designer, or when you deal with a celebrity and their manager, what is the protocol for all of that, So just that again, observation, just being on a set, understanding how these things work from someone you admire and appreciate. I think that's probably the first step to go about it.
Right. And speaking of internships and assisting gigs, how do you think students can reach out firstly? And secondly, what kind of students get picked up by the bigger players in the industry? What is the industry looking out for?
So I think what I can speak for myself and maybe the few stylist friends I know, honestly, 99% of us have no criteria for hiring an assistant other than be hardworking and don't be a flake. that is literally the only criteria. I don't really look at what educational qualifications they have, whether they went to fashion school or not. You know, a lot of these kids, they come with CSM degrees and they come from Parsons and they come from all of these amazing fashion schools. But literally, I mean, no disrespect, but they would be pitted against anyone else with a BCom degree for me, or 12th pass even. I just need to know that, you know, there's someone who are willing to work hard, without an ego, because a lot of times this job is extremely demanding and way more demanding on the assistant stylists on a job.
Right.
You know, there's all kinds of bizarre work hours. You will be summoned and beckoned for fittings at an actor's house at midnight, and there's no way for you to decline that. You will be paid shitty money, and you still have to figure out 3 days of sourcing, pay for your food, pay for your travel. Sometimes conveyance is not even reimbursed. So there's a lot of stress that goes into being an assistant stylist. So I just need to know that you have the guts to face that kind of work lifestyle. You know, it's not.
And huge thanks for saying that. I'm sorry, I'm jumping in between here, because every single masterclass, every single industry insider that we speak to, there is only one thing that they keep on repeating. We're looking for hardworking candidates. We're looking for kids who are persistent, who persistent, sorry, and willing to put in 100%. That kind of effort, that kind of passion that you can bring on the table. Your skill can be yet developed on the job. But what they're looking for is honest, hardworking candidates. And
Yeah.
believe me when I say this to you, Divyak, we've had so many masterclasses till now, and every single industry insider has the same thing to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just that pretty much. You know, you need to have an open mind. You need to be willing to work very hard. Of course, if you are a type A personality like me, who's hyper organized and a huge list maker, and, you know, keeps like loves their post-its and their lists, that's a huge perk, because you could be the most creative person on the planet, but if you don't send the right courier to the right designer, or you damage a garment on a set, or you're not able to submit the right credits when they are printing, these are all little mistakes that become hugely magnified, you know.
Right.
So I think working on your organizational skills is something that assisting also should be teaching you, and you should be open to working on that first. Don't start out with, oh, I want to style a cover shoot, or I want to be sitting front row at Fashion Week, or I want to take a selfie with Deepika Padukone and be her BFF. That's all eventual perks of the job if you're good at what you do. I think some of the most successful stylists today are where they are because they really put in that time, and, you know, they didn't have an ego about it. They were willing to take that pressure, and, you know, that's literally where it starts. That's just the base qualification that you need to have.
Right. And in terms of building a portfolio, firstly, how can students build a very solid portfolio? And how relevant is it to have a good portfolio while reaching out to the industry?
I think a portfolio is important as a fringe benefit. I'll be very honest. Like, if I see someone who, you know, I always like to meet and speak to people before I hire them. And I always hire assistants on a per project basis. That's at least how I work, because I don't like anyone to be tied down, and I don't like to be tied down. I want to take the whole month of June off and, you know, not work. I don't want some kids to be dependent on me for the salary. So I always do it as a freelance thing. So when I speak to applicants, or when I speak to people who want to assist an intern, of course, the willingness to work hard, we've done that already, but a portfolio really helps for me to sort of understand the language and the aesthetic that they already come with. And that's a tricky space, because sometimes you don't really want to take on someone who's got very strong ideas, you know, because if I meet a 20-year-old and they have all of these ideas about, you know, what fashion is and who their favorite designer is and what they want to be when they grow up, that's also kind of putting off, because it's a very, you know, like, it's like how our parents would tell us, you don't know anything yet, you know, like, age is the best teacher, experience is what's going to teach you. So that openness is actually more refreshing to me than seeing a 28-page PDF of, you know, test shoots that you've done. Very honestly, I think even when I was advised this when I started freelancing, is that when you go to meetings, when you show a client your work, when you're meeting a producer, you know, pitching for a job, they don't want to see more than 10 strong pictures in your book. That's it. Even for a established, experienced stylist, I maximum would have a PDF of about 10 images from what I consider as a curation of my strongest work. Nobody is going to have the patience to sit through pages and pages or scroll through Behance page after Behance page. They don't have the time or the patience. Today also, when I'm getting booked for a job, people will ask, okay, who's the stylist? Divyak D'Souza. They'll go onto their Instagram. They'll probably do 3 finger swipes. And in the first 3 finger swipes, they've decided if they liked my work enough to give me the job. So literally that's the attention span of people when they're hiring you with regards to your portfolio. So you need to make sure that what you're putting there is limited but strong. And, it sort of encapsulates what you're trying to say without pakawing the person in front of you. So just keep your portfolio limited.
That's also the reason why I keep telling students very often that when it comes to getting headhunted, a lot of times the industry reaches out to us. A lot of brands want students who can intern with them for a campaign or something of that sort. It always depends on the person who's called for your portfolio. And ultimately, the only thing they are concerned with is the visual imagery that's in front of them. The first few images would make it or break it. And that's just the reality of what it is. Divyak, speaking in terms of research tools and cultivating interests and hobbies beyond styling, how important do you think is to sort of build yourself in that aspect?
I mean, I think that's everything, right? I mean, if you're an artist and if you're planning to create stuff, your influences and what you're getting inspired from, that's not something that even I can stop doing at any point in this career. You have to make sure that you're constantly updated about what's happening, which is why I said being observational and a little bit of a restless personality type really does well at this job, because you have to be curious, you have to ask questions, you have to know what's up and what's happening with the zeitgeist. It's like I said, it's not enough just gawking at beautiful clothes or knowing about pop culture and which actress wore which designer for IFA awards. Like, most of the time, this is a very honest confession, is I never know who is wearing what. I don't even concern myself. I like to surround myself with excellence. I'm like, I want to look at beautiful things that will inspire me to create my own hopefully beautiful things. So like very often, like for example, one practice that I have on every editorial at least that I do, because editorials are a space where the stylist still has a little bit more sort of creative direction and freedom. That's one big difference between advertising styling and editorial styling. Is in an editorial, you're sort of the director. You're putting together that team, you're hiring that photographer, you're casting that model, and it's truly collaborative because everybody's sort of showcasing their best work with one common vision in mind. Very often in an ad, even though it'll pay you triple what an editorial would, the brief is a PPT that comes from an ad agency saying, "Ye color ki pink ganji le aao." And they will, believe me, that is the hardest job you will do as a stylist. I know it sounds it sounds funny, but it's not. Like the amount they will nachaw you for that one pink ganji, whether it's the thickness of the strap or the texture of the fabric or the shade of pink. Because initially I used to have a very bad attitude towards all of this, and I was like, it's just a damn ganji, take what you get. But eventually I sort of understood that these advertising agencies are operating on a global scale and putting in millions of dollars, rupees in research to arrive at what does our customer or our client like to look at, what kind of pink is most soothing to their eye. They've got all of their answers in place. You're just being hired to execute a vision that's been decided. And you get paid a lot of money for it. I believe you're paid mostly for stress management and time management on an advertising job, not so much for your creativity. But there is a creativity with even executing something like that. It's a different kind of creativity. Right. But that is what an advertising job is. And, in popular industry terms, it's referred to as money jobs because people are like, they're not really looking for you to, be path breaking with that pink ganji. Just get them the pink ganji in their PPT and sit quietly on set, So yeah, I think I've totally lost track of your question because I do so much buck. What was the
No, but this was really nice. No, what I was asking about is research tools, cultivating interest in hobbies beyond styling as a subject overall for the creative industry. And you answered it pretty much bang on. So no stress on that. The next question that I have is slightly different. Divyak, I want to know, and a lot of students here would also like to understand, how important is it to have a good hand on technical skills, such as a few softwares, perhaps maybe a Photoshop or InDesign, a little bit knowledge about photography. How important is it, and how does it come into play if you're a stylist?
Honestly, I think that is one huge advantage that a lot of aspiring stylists, especially in this post-COVID era, will have, if they learn to equip themselves with technical skills, such as all of the above that you mentioned. I mean, even in a magazine, for example, the intern who knew how to lay out a page on InDesign was always preferred and given more responsibility than, say, a duffer like me who didn't even know how to use Microsoft Excel at that point, you know? So I think, like, just sort of pick what interests you. Does graphic designing interest you? Does laying out things on a computer interest you? Does working with, you know, digital art, does that interest you? And on the other hand, also, of course, photography, because the print medium is all about visuals. It's all about taking an image, you know, and eventually I call myself a photographer stylist, because I really look to my photographer on most jobs. He's the sort of director and the driver of the shoot. He's going to capture that moment that we've all worked towards, you know, whether it is the costume that I've put together, whether it is the beauty look that the makeup and hair artist has put together, or the mood that the model is channeling with her body language. It's the photographer who eventually gets that moment and captures it for all of us. So if you understand how cameras work, if you work on understanding lighting, I know right now it's very easy with smartphones. Things have really changed the game. You don't really need to own expensive cameras anymore. You don't need to buy fancy lights and equipment. But just understanding the basics of lighting is a huge skill. You know, when you work on a shoot, for example, if I send someone from my team outsourcing and they know that this is an outdoor lighting shoot. Like we just did a Paris commercial, for example, where you know that the girl is going to be running around in a summer dress on an open lawn in bright sunlight. It automatically, someone who understands what clothes behave like under different lighting, you know, they will not pick out an organza, they will not pick out a linen for an outdoor sunshine shoot that won't have a lining, for example. You know, you understand basics of transparency, you understand basics of there's going to be wind, there's going to be movement, so pick a fabric that flies, you know, simple stuff like that comes from understanding things like lighting. So try to equip yourself with things that are beyond just putting together a great outfit. You know, I think that's something you will anyway learn and cultivate, but just try and pick up technical skills if you can. Learn apps, you know, learn editing on apps. Yeah, I think just kids are better at this than I am. I think it's a little bit, you know, strange for me to give this bhashan because I'm not the most tech savvy myself. You know,
but it's very much welcome, because coming from somebody who has that kind of expertise versus students who are still kind of launching themselves out into the industry. Very quickly, I'm also going to invite Sonam Parwani at this point. She is the design head at the Mumbai campus. I'm also calling her to ask you a question. Besides, I'm on a miserable network today, so in case I get cut off, she'll be able to loop herself in. Sonam, hey, would you like to come and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Gauri. Hi, Divyak. Such a pleasure to hear you speak. We've been following you on Instagram, and your memes and your Instagram stories are absolutely entertaining. They're hilarious on another level. So I think all our students were really looking forward to actually hear you in person. So my personal so many thank yous. You know that you're on this masterclass.
Not at all. Thank you. This is actually the first time I'm talking about fashion and about my job in 2.5 months. And it just feels unreal. It feels like I'm talking about a past life, because now my life is bartan, jhadu, pocha, evening yoga. So this is actually, it's been great for me. So thank you guys.
No, absolutely not. In fact, Batul Jamal was with us a couple of weeks back, and she was like, "You're gonna have Divyak," and I was like, "Yeah," and she was like, she was all praises to you, by the way. But I actually have a personal question for you. I mean, you were talking about the responsibilities and the power a magazine has, especially with its cover and its editorial shoot. And at least I think the generation that both of us come from is a generation that has kind of worshipped magazines. And the editorial was almost like, I mean, I remember reading magazines from cover to cover, and the editorial was like the final climax. It was literally something that I remember it was something that kind of smelled the zeitgeist in the air, from catwalk to catwalk, and it kind of like it was a finale of what fashion should be and what fashion will be.
Your voice is not very clear. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Divyak. Did you not hear the question?
I heard most of it. The video is a bit catchy, but please go on.
Okay, so my my question to you, actually, it's quite a fun question. If you were to build a visual narrative today, what would it be? I mean, you know, if you had to build your personal visual narrative, what would it be?
Wow, so you mean like almost like a mood board of sorts for what I would, is it pertaining to the lockdown and this whole COVID-19
Yes,
situation?
yes. I mean, in today's masterclass, you said that, you know, that there are a couple of magazines that are, you know, showcasing actresses with horses and, you know, you kind of cited a few examples, which I'm not going to repeat because you already said it. So it kind of like leads me to asking you, so if you were to create a social dialogue, you know, with the audience or with the woke generation that we know of today, because the generation is very woke. They are very, very, very much aware of what's happening in the world with respect to, you know, politics, the migrant laborers, you know, the new announcement by the Prime Minister. We're reading. And, you know, whether it was the CAA, all of these things, they've all become part of our social dialogue.
Yeah.
If you had to create something that was, of course, in a fashion magazine, but was also creating a statement, a social statement, what would that be like? I mean, this is just something I asked out of my own personal curiosity.
No, of course. It's a great question actually, because you know, it's very easy for people to sit here and criticize what other magazines are doing, but because I understand the position they're in, I also understand the pressures they're under, and the fact that they have to cater to numbers, and the advertisers are going to want to see popular numbers and enough likes and all of that. I personally don't really care about being popular. I never have. Even on my Instagram, I do pretty much what I want on my stories, and my posts are just showcasing my work. So I don't care about popularity. But if I really had to talk from a fashion magazine lens, because we have to remember these are not news publications. Their responsibility is not to give people just news, but to for sure be a little bit celebratory, talk about the positives and the joyful aspect of things. But I think it starts with showcasing people who truly matter. You know what I mean? Just doing one collage of doctors during the lockdown, that's a great start, but that's not where it should stop. This is an opportunity for editors across the board to sort of tell their advertisers that, look, we want to cut the bullshit and we want to do real talk. I want to see a Faye D'Souza on a magazine cover talking to me about how she talks about what she thinks about the situation. I want to see a Rana Ayub, for example, on a cover. You know, these are the women, and it shouldn't just be the responsibility of Femina or an India Today magazine. You know, and we shouldn't just be looking at sample size girls because they fit into a Dior dress. That shouldn't be our criteria for putting someone on a cover.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, but thank you. Thank you for that.
I've always, you know, I used to be 105 kilos till 2016. And then I went on this crazy lifestyle change and I, whatever, became my current size. But it always bothered me that, you know, very often I've seen this happening in editorial meetings where a actor or a celebrity or a known face was rejected from being on a cover or in a shoot because she was not sample size. And very often I know that's a very true concern, because you have to fit an XYZ brand, but XYZ brand is giving you only size 6 dresses, and then you have an actor who's a size 14, it automatically becomes okay, no, isko hata do, she won't fit. You know, so that needs to change. I think editors need to stand up to the fact that their CEOs and their publishers need to back them up with this, that it cannot just be about promoting brands with deep coffers who are willing to throw money at you to put their dresses on the cover. It has to be about talking about the zeitgeist, like we keep saying. You know, it has to be stories that matter, even when it comes to what people should be buying. I'm not saying we have fashion magazines shouldn't tell you what to shop, and they shouldn't tell you what will look good on you. You must do that. But don't go through a consumerist lens where you're telling people you need these things in your wardrobe now. These are the lipsticks you need to be a desirable woman. You know, that should never be the tone henceforth. I'm really hoping that for future, it's going to be a lot more about, body positivity shouldn't just be a term we sling about once in a while when we want to show how real we are. It needs to be something you actually practice. Get Dior to send you a size 14 dress. And if they don't send you a size 14 dress, don't put Dior on the cover. It's just as simple as that. You need to have a little bit more guts. And of course, the marketing and the business heads in these magazines need to back the editors. I think we have some fantastic editors out there who are very talented, but they're seldom given the power that they should be. Everything revolves around which brand will pay how much money and what does brand want, So this is an opportunity for a magazine to really stand up and be like, you know what, not interested. We want to build a readership base of people who want to talk about the community and who want to talk about shit that matters. And then automatically, if you're doing the right thing and you're saying the right stuff, you will have that audience and brands will be forced to play by your rules. I know it all sounds very romantic, but I just like to believe that that might happen and should happen,
No, in fact, more than romantic, it sounds very practical, because if not now, then I don't know when are we going to wake up and open our eyes towards inclusivity as a whole. And that is also the kind of value that we try to incorporate within our classrooms to our students and to every industry interaction that we have. Okay, so now I'm quickly going to pick up into a lot of student questions that we have here. Allow me, Divyak, we are running short of time, I do understand, but we'll try to pick up as many as we can. The first one is from Riya Malhotra. She's studying her postgraduate in luxury brand management, and she'd like to understand what are the kind of roles and positions in magazines like ELLE and GQ that students who are studying the curriculum that she can aim for.
Okay. Hi, Ria. So I think when you have to understand the sort of employee system in a magazine setup, you look at the masthead page, which is where they list out the entire team. There's the left side and there's the right side. The left side is typically all of your editorial positions. So your writers, your editors, your stylists, all of the people who work on the content creation, they're on the left side typically. And then there's the right side of the masthead, which is all the people who work on the business aspects, pitching the ads, ad space in the magazine, coming up with innovative, marketing ideas to sort of generate revenue. So there's those two distinct roles. And I think, it totally depends on temperamentally and technically what you are trained to do, which side of the fence you'd like to be on. For me, it was not a question. I always knew I wanted to work in the creative side of things. I mean, I know it started in production, then it went on to writing, then it went on to eventually styling. And I was lucky enough to be able to try my hand at all of those things. But yeah, the different position, I think for a fashion magazine, you have a features department, which is mostly your writers. It could be writing about beauty or fashion or lifestyle. Then you have, of course, the styling department, which are self-explanatory. It's all of your stylists. You have a beauty team for most magazines too now. And you'll have a digital team of a digital editor and the people who work with him or her. So that's the creative side of things. And on the business side of things, you have, like I said, ad sales, the people who sell ad space, and you have marketing, which is doing things like your events, things like on-ground activities. Like a Vogue wedding show is something that the marketing department in a Vogue magazine would be very actively putting together, along with, of course, inputs from the creative and editorial side, But yeah, that's pretty much the gist.
Okay, and thank you so much for that. There's another question here from Akriti Arora. She'd like to know, during these tough times now, they don't have access to going out. There's no way they can collaborate with other students or models or photographers or stylists alike. How do you have some quick tools that you could give them to sort of build their portfolios while they're sitting at home?
I'll tell you very honestly, don't look at productivity as your main goal right now. At least in its traditional expected sense, where you're like, oh, if I'm sitting at home, I must be generating something to post on Instagram, or I must have something to show. Don't stress about that right now. I would say just work on looking at and listening to and watching all of the things that you think will add perspective to your life. If that means reading the right articles, if that means listening to a new musician every week, pick a musician, pick a genre for the week. Let's say you want to listen to blues and jazz, and then you want to go down that rabbit hole and look at the famous artists, maybe what they wore, what their concert outfits were like. I mean, I'm a huge geek. I keep saying this, but for me, I trip on that kind of stuff. Like I was watching Hollywood on Netflix, and that just sent me down this path of looking at what costumes were like in old Hollywood, right. Alfred Hitchcock movies. Then from there, you understand that Prada did an entire season inspired by Hitchcock. So it just sort of you go down. You just need to be curious pick something that you want to know more about and just run with that. Automatically ideas will come to you. Even if it's a TikTok video that you want to make about something you saw, those ideas will come to you, and that all counts now for a portfolio. A portfolio is not just an outfit that you put together on a person against a wall that the paps clicked. That's not just portfolio. A portfolio, honestly, most brands today will want to see who you are, what your aesthetic is, what your politics are, who you are on social media, and what you're putting out there. And all of this is a part of that, right? Like the fact that I put out stupid memes, it might really put many people off, but I think it also gives insight into a lot of people that I'm quite goofy if I want to be. And that's just the price you pay for being authentic. And I think if you're authentic, that's all you really have as an artist and a creator. So just chill, just sharpen your mind right now. Don't worry about having a resume and all,
Right, and build yourself to be a brand in itself.
Yeah, eventually that will happen if you're authentic. I think that will organically happen. You don't really have to try hard then,
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. And there's another question here from Varsha Bhatija. It reads, hello, how do we approach these big magazines with our work? And is there a way to present it? Do they put out do they put out interning requirements online, or is it necessary to go to their offices?
So with most magazines, the bleak reality is it's very often word of mouth. I won't lie, even when they're hiring interns or assistants, word of mouth plays a much bigger role very often, because understandably they're getting that many emails a day regarding internships, they're getting that many DMs a day. So what I would suggest is, if you can try and find a way to personally connect with a fashion editor or a stylist in a magazine team, politely send them a text requesting them for a personal email ID where you could send your CV across, and then you email them your CV and then maybe wait for a call to be interviewed. It's going to be a little bit of a wait. You may not get responses all the time. Like I remember when I was 19, I sent out 15, 20 resumes and only GQ called back to say, we want you to come and take the chai coffee orders on a shoot, So it's not, there's no guarantees, but that's the right way to do it. That's the protocol. If you know someone who knows someone who can put you in touch with a stylist who's looking to hire, nothing like it. A lot of magazines do put out messages when they're looking to hire for their teams. But that's honestly very rare, and most of them will still hire someone who their friend told them is a smart girl who works hard, So try to find a personal connection if you can. And of course, sessions like this, I mean, people like me are always looking to hire, we're always looking to, and if if someone like Amrita texted me telling me that she has students who want to intern or assist, that's always a great in, it helps to sort of give me also like some kind of a credible source of where the team is coming from. So yeah, just reach out to someone, message them, send them your CV, and then hopefully things will work out from there,
Great. Thank you so much for that. There's another one here from Brinja. She's studying styling in Mumbai. It says, what is the process involved for working as a freelance stylist, and what are the pros and cons involved?
That's a very, it's another lecture for another day, but the short of it is, I always try and tell this to the lucky few who can start in magazines and are not very stressed about making a lot of money to start off with, but try and start with some kind of editorial background. You will be working with the best talents out there, whether it's photographers or makeup artists, set designers. You will be interacting and dealing with some of the best designer clothes, because the top brands and designers will happily send samples to any of your magazines to shoot with. So your interaction in the very beginning is, you're surrounded by excellence and you're surrounded by an atmosphere of creation and storytelling, which is where I think you should start your fashion journey. The minute you move into freelance, like I said, it's a lot more cut and dry. There's very few unless you're in costume design for, let's say, movies, or you're working on a show. That's probably one aspect where there's a lot more storytelling. You're working with the director, you're working with actors, you're creating characters and telling their story through clothes. So that's a very exciting process. But typically, if you're talking about advertising jobs, whether it's print or whether it's commercial, admin, logistics, and being aware of time and budget, that is actually the primary skill. They need 5 kinds of pink ganjis. You need to know where to get them, how much to buy them for, and when, by when you need to procure all of that and do a fitting. So it's a lot more practical, which is something that's easier to do once you've built this bank and develop some kind of aesthetic of your own, then everything else becomes much easier. Doing an advertising shoot then becomes more about, like I said, pressure management, because you're talking to the ad agency, you're talking to the producer, you're talking to the client, you're talking to the actor. There's that many people you need to talk to and deal with that many levels of feedback and commentary and instructions, which will not come unless you've worked already a certain amount and you understand how to handle all of that pressure.
Right.
Yeah, freelance is a lot more pressure, definitely a lot more money if you do well, but yeah, a lot more pressure. And creativity, I would say maybe 3 out of 10 jobs in the commercial world would feel creatively inspiring, but 7 out of 10 is going to be ye PPT hai, ye reference hai, ye costume lekar aao,
Right. And I see Sonam has another question that she's typed in. It's very sweet of you to type, Sonam, but you have all access. You can unmute yourself and come and ask.
Great. Gauri, can you hear me? Because the
Yes,
last
yes.
time. Okay, great. So first, I'll actually take a student question by Ruchika Chaudhary. She asks, how does being signed by an agency help? Does it make life better in terms of getting the kind of work you want to do or better pay? So after you answer this question, I'll ask mine.
Okay. Honestly, I've now been with Inega for about 2 years out of the 12, 13 that I've been working. And it's only been a good thing. I will say that working with an agency is the future. It's going to be how things will be streamlined, because very often in a market like India, where fashion is also a relatively new business, right? Fashion Week has only been happening for about 20 years here. Styling is a very new profession, and Aita Shroff was probably one of the first stylists in this industry, and she's still very much hot and relevant and happening, and she's very young still, so it's a very new job. So automatically there's a lot of lack of discipline and systemic consistency. Different producers will try to get you on the cheap if you don't have an agent who's sort of talking money for you. Things like work hour shifts where you're not supposed to be working more than 8 to 10 hours a day. Those can get dragged on for 16 hours, and nobody really cares if you are complaining on set, because there's no one really to get your back, have your back. So that kind of systemic discipline, I think that is something an agent really helps with, because if I ever feel that there's some kind of malpractice going on, or procedurally a shoot is not really going in my favor, I have that agent to sort of call and intervene for me. Of course, they handle things like your day-to-day calendar, they manage your time for you, they handle your paperwork, bills, chasing your payments. So all of that managerial stuff honestly makes it very easy and clears a lot of your headspace to then just focus on the creative parts of your job. So I think agencies are honestly the way forward, and everyone, if they can get the opportunity to have an agent, you of course pay commissions on every job that you do. That's a reality. Depending on how senior you are, how established you are in the market, those commission slabs can differ. It could be 10%, going up to 30% of the money you make on each job. But depending on the volumes of work you're doing and depending on the kind of income that you're generating, that sometimes feels worth it. And, of course, an agency can help pitch you for the right kind of work. They can, when someone calls them for a campaign, say Inega gets called about models, no matter what the job, they're one of the best agencies for models. It's just a gentle nudge from my agent to the client saying that, why don't you look at Divyak's portfolio? And if his work is something that works for you, we're happy to sort of have him on board for your job. So it's a simple sort of word of mouth, thing that an agent with credibility can do for you. So definitely, I think having an agency is great, and it works.
Great. I have another student question before I get to mine. So Aishwarya Pujari asks, Aishwarya has written to me privately, but Aishwarya, would you like to ask your question directly, or should I go for it? Okay, I'll just go for it. So Aishwarya asks, could you please elaborate on the process that goes behind conducting a virtual shoot? And how do you go about it?
Oh, Aishwarya, if only I knew. I really, I think the bottom line in all of this is we're all just sort of ideating right now. We're all tabling our ideas, with whatever little experience we each have. But the fact of the matter is, styling is not a virtual job. It is not something that you can wholly and entirely do on a Zoom chat. A huge part of the job is just feeling a vibe. Like when I meet someone, when I'm supposed to dress someone, I need to, my job, say if you're working as a celebrity stylist, let's say, your key job is to articulate who this person is using clothing. And that's not something you can do over a Zoom chat or over FaceTime. I need to meet this person. I need to understand what their lifestyle is. I need to understand who they are as people. And that's the only way I will then, and it's, you know, it's also a lot of back and forth practically, because, you know, you take all of these clothes for a trial. Some may work, some may not work. Then you have to go back to the drawing board, maybe pick up some additional options. So that the physical element of styling is, it's not something I can wrap my mind around and negate. You know, I feel like it's very, very crucial to the job. So personally, I would much rather sit at home than do FaceTime shoots, because I mean, I really don't know how that will work. Telling someone what to wear over the computer sounds like what my mother did to me when I was a child. And that's really not how styling works in my head, you know? So yeah, sorry, I don't really have an answer to that.
Okay, but I think that was answered in itself. Okay, we have one more student. His name is Sai Sandeep, and he's asked me whether he can directly have a word with you, since he's worked with you in the past, and then I'll have my turn.
Of course, and Sandeep is a lovely boy. I've worked on an editorial shoot with him recently, in fact. Happy to hear from him, please.
Sai, please go for it.
I'm just
Hi.
unmuting him. Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Suza. How are you doing?
Hi, Sandy. How are you?
I'm doing good. Like, I really like your shirt, and someone in the chat box asking, where is that from?
This is from one of my favorite designers, Pero, and it's made with 100% sustainable cotton. And it's lasted me so long that honestly, it's worth more than 50 fast fashion shirts that I may have bought, you know. So yeah, it's going to be the way forward. But yeah, it's Pero. I love Pero on Instagram. Please check them out. One of my favorite designers in India.
That's so sweet. So my question is, so a couple of weeks back we chatted about sustainability and thing, and you also told me that how you want to practice the sustainability on your shoot sets. So can you please tell us to all the students, because it's very important for all the upcoming stylists that they want to use, you know, our resources very productively. Can you please tell that to all us?
That's a very good question, actually, and something we've not really touched upon in detail in this chat. But I think, like I said, sustainability is a very loose term unless you club it with ethical. Sustainable and ethical are two things, they're two sides of the same coin. And whether it's at a consumer level, and personally when you go out there to consume fashion, to stylists and content creators and what they choose to promote, and of course to the big giants retailing and manufacturing and making these clothes, I think at all levels there needs to be systemic change. If we start with, of course, industrially, you'll find people far better equipped to talk about, you know, more sustainable and ethical manufacturing practices, whether it is the fabrics that we use, whether it is valuing the labor and the workforce. I mean, the kind of treatment that we're seeing, that, you know, fabric workers, I mean, garment makers are being meted out right now. It's pathetic. And these are fast fashion brands whose owners are some of the richest people in the world. And they've not provided basic human rights to these people. They've not provided them living wage. They've not provided them with medical benefits. Where do these people go now when they shut their factories down arbitrarily? So I think talking about the human angle of sustainability, respecting the workers, using fabrics that sustain well. And when I mean sustainable fabrics, I'm not saying everything has to be a jhalla kurta, you know, that's made out of only khadi. You know, we have industrial fabrics also that are sustainable, whether it's a tencel, whether it is recycled polyester, whether it is, you know, there's another one I read about, it's Econil, I think that's how it's pronounced, I'm not sure, Econil, but yeah, just, you know, there's a lot of industrial fabrics too that are sustainable, durable. So I think from a manufacturing level, there's all of those changes that need to be made, both human and environmental. And that has to be something that all of you guys as future industry professionals need to understand and equip yourselves with. Ask basic questions when you are buying clothes or when you're sourcing a garment or putting together an outfit. Who made it? Where is it coming from? What is it made of? Is the price of this outfit fair? What is the profit margin for where it's produced to where it's being sold? I want to know, I hope that this is something that becomes a norm, but every brand needs to answer to their consumer today. Who made this outfit? What are you doing? What is your supply chain? Are these employees being given the right, the benefits and the perks that anyone who works deserves? You have the dignity to work, you have the right to work, and you should get the benefits to work. I don't want to see a Rana Plaza happening ever. I don't want to think that I bought a pair of jeans made by someone who lost their life making those jeans. These are not small questions, and there's no way to skirt around them. And the greenwashing that a lot of these brands do by saying that, oh, we used less water to make these jeans, but you still employed underprivileged children and you paid them less than minimum wage. And don't discount the human aspect. Environmental and human go hand in hand. These are questions that we need to ask from now on, and not buckle under the pressure of big ticket corporates who have the money just because they're willing to buy ad space, or they're willing to pay you to wear a t-shirt and put it out there. I don't think that it's difficult, because very often hunger precedes everything else. You need money to run a house. But even for me personally, I do very little paid stuff on my social media. It's not something I enjoy, and I've told my agency as well, I will only do it for brands which I genuinely consume or hope to consume, and whose ethical practices I'm aware of. I want to know how they're making what they're making, and I want to know if those resources are being equally distributed in the community. That's the only way to truly be sustainable. You can't just say I've used less water and try to get away with greenwashing. So yeah, I think that is the way forward. Just ask the right questions before you even source an outfit, for example, if you're a stylist, or before you buy something tomorrow when you go to a shop. Please find out all of this information before you really make that purchase. No one's saying not to buy. You definitely should be buying less, but buy local. Please support local designers, local industries, local fabric stores, your tailors. You could just buy fabric from a local dukaan, go to a tailor, and you'll get a great kurta that will last you way longer than any fast fashion brand. So put these things into practice. There's no question. Just not asking for a straw is not enough. Just not buying a plastic bottle is not enough. That's basic. We all should be doing those things. But as industry creators and professionals, I think, these are just some of the changes we should all be making.
Yeah. Basically, it should be like your lifestyle rather than, being a term fashion.
Absolutely. It's just the way we all need to operate from now on. There's no question about it in my mind,
True. Yeah. And thank you. That's absolutely, good way of putting it out. And congratulations on your first ever webinar with 260 plus students.
Guys. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you. Thank you for
Bye.
that. Sonam, can we quickly have your question now?
Yes. Divyak, you mentioned earlier that we've seen the numbers, and it's a question that we are all asking about how magazines are sustaining themselves. And we also understand that the pre-COVID times required magazines to have alliances with printing press. The administrative cost, the manufacturing cost was huge, and there was a lot of investment that went into running a simple magazine. And we also know that we are entering into the world of entrepreneurs, of startups. I have a slightly skewed question for you, but I know you would give us an honest answer. So for free thinkers like you, and for people who have such a brave opinion, who are able to own their opinion and have a conversation on it, do you think that the future of magazines and publications is online, is digital, and it's now not so unthinkable of creatives like you to collaborate with other creatives to start your own magazine? This is just a thought that kind of came in my head, because we see globally that, of course, there is Condé Nast and there's Harper's Bazaar, which are like heritage magazines. But we also see like tiny autonomous magazines that have their own point of view, that are brave. They are talking about body positivity, ethical, slow fashion. Do you think that, the magazine industry in India could see a surge of something like that? I mean, you're the industry person, so I'm asking this question to you.
No, absolutely. In fact, I think the answer lies within your question itself. I do think that the future belongs to the community out there. There is no question that I don't think anybody's in the mood to be talked down to anymore. Nobody's really looking at the heritage brands to tell them how to think or how to dress or what to wear anymore. The very fact that there are, influencers and bloggers who have way more followers and way more engagements on their social media accounts goes to prove that that is the mood of consumers today and audiences today. They want to understand how to make things their own. They don't want to be talked down to. So I do think that, engaging the community is probably the only way for heritage brands to survive. And doing it mindfully, of course, not just putting someone on a cover because she's famous and she has a lot of numbers on social media, but putting somebody who's relevant. And there's enough of those people out there today. Like you said, lots of independent web zines are definitely going to come up. I would love to, in fact, do something with, any collaborators who are happy to create content like that and just make it a little bit more cerebral, because I do find that lacking a lot, in a lot of magazines and the digital content particularly. Like I saw one post about 5 hair sunscreens that you can't wait to use when lockdown lifts. And it pissed me off because I was like, firstly, how did I not know hair sunscreen was even a thing? And secondly, how can you be hawking hair sunscreens to me right now? Are you nuts, So I just feel like those are the kind of posts that, right now, because of commercial pressures, I'm guessing they have to do that. And we all probably will at some point have to do that, which is great, do it. But there is a wiser way to do it. Why don't you get women you admire to try those hair sunscreens, send them a bottle each, ask them to wear it, do a little bit of a customer review. There's that way to make something even marketing driven, a little bit more authentic. So yeah, I don't think it's impossible. I think engaging with the community is the way forward. I don't think magazines are going to shut down or die. I just think that they need to tweak their language and they need to tweak the sort of space that, how they communicate. It needs to be a little bit more us and not so much me and you. You know what I mean? I think that needs to change.
Great.
Right.
I think that's a phenomenal answer. Thank you, Divyak.
Awesome.
I've had my share of questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sonam, for that.
Great questions. Thank you.
We do have a huge inbox full. We'll try to get as many answered as possible in the few minutes that we're left now with. The next question is from Vedai. She writes, as you have spoken about enriching ourselves with content that helps us grow, could you please suggest a few sources like websites, books, artists, etc.?
Wow. That's like, I don't know, yeah. That's like a lifelong conversation, no, isn't it? It's like 5 minutes ago, a friend texted me about a show I should watch, and I went and I watched it.
Yeah.
There's just so much. Yeah. I mean, just start with. For me, music is a big influencer. So I always look at, like even if it's Billboard Top 40, which is probably the most commercial music out there, but just to sort of see who are the artists right now, what is the work that they're putting out. Just look at the top music of our times. I don't know. I really can't answer that very quickly. DM me, I'll start forwarding you some of the stuff that I'm looking at, hopefully that'll inspire some ideas, but just anything. Start with a director. If you liked Parasite, go watch Bong Joon's other movies. You know what I mean? Just start somewhere, just, and take it from there. It's not a short answer, sorry. DM me.
So I'm guessing what they were looking out for is like a few names, but I think that will be helpful if you just follow him on Instagram.
Yeah.
You'll see where he's reposting from, and you'll pretty much get the gist of that. Great.
Also, amazing faculty. These are the guys who'll tell you what to look at, yeah? Ask them.
Right. Just quickly toggling through the rest of the questions. A lot of the questions here are about how students can reach out to you, how can they intern under you. Divyak, what do you have to say for that?
Right now, guys, I have no work other than, like I said, Bartan, Jhadu, and Pocha. So as much as I would love to work with all of you bright young minds, in the current phase, I don't see 2020 as being a very busy year. It's very doomsday prophecy-like of me to say, but I don't think this, there's going to be a lot of radical changes in how photo shoots happen. We're not going to have 200 people on a set anymore. We're not going to be able to be up in each other's faces when we're working anymore. So the traditional shooting formats are going to change, and nobody knows how. Nobody has an answer how. Will there be a sanitation team that's spraying down everything on a set? Will we be looking at 20 people and under crews? Maybe the stylist doesn't even go to set. Maybe I do a trial, set the look, and I bounce. Actor does hair makeup at home and then goes to studio, so there's no makeup team on the set. So there's going to be a lot of these changes, at least in 2020 for the short run, that we will be seeing. And reduced workforce is a natural occurrence, where early on an ad I could bill a producer for 3 people on my team. Probably now they won't even be willing to entertain the assistant fees as part of the shooting cost. So we don't have answers right now. If we're lucky enough to be able to live off our savings and survive for a bit without making an income, I would consider you to be the lucky ones. Do what I'm doing, cut down your lifestyle costs, your fixed costs. At this point, try to save as much as you can until work picks up again. But when it does, and I believe that it will, and hopefully in a invigorated, refreshed, sustainable, ethical, all of that way, just email me. Yeah? I think that's the easiest thing to do. My email is divyak.d'souza@gmail.com. It's also on my Instagram link. And yeah, just send me an email. 1-page CV is enough. And yeah, if there's a job that comes up, we'll have a chat. We'll figure out if it works for both of us, and that's probably the best way to do it.
Great, thank you so much. I have one last question, Divyak. Today afternoon, I was engaging with a student who's interested in communication as a whole and loves to write. And she asked me, how can I reach out to the industry? I mean, of course, there is a lockdown, but in the meanwhile, what is a healthy way to go about it? My personal suggestion to her was, why don't you start reaching out to people over LinkedIn, over Instagram, share works of what you've already created, and maybe post the lockdown, they reach out to you in return. What is another suggestion that you could add to a student who writes and is looking out to reaching out to like-minded people from the industries, of course, looking at jobs in the longer run? What would you sort of give back as a suggestion to a student like that?
I think like I was saying, during lockdown is probably not the best time to really reach out to people asking for work because they're probably not working themselves, so they really won't have much to offer you, and your email or your DM might just fall on deaf ears because you don't know what kind of a day they're having, and they're probably not going to be checking their unread messages for CVs. That's just how it is. Right. But use this opportunity to build some of your own stuff if you write. Start a blog, put up short blurbs of your stories on your Instagram with swipe up links to your blog, maybe, I don't know, tag the people whose attention or the publications or the editors whose attention you'd like on your stories. I have some brilliant creative artists, illustrators who very often, you see a picture from an archival shoot that they've sort of just sketched or painted and they put it up on their Insta and they tag you, and that's so special. And it's also cool because they're doing their own thing as well, right? I mean, it's engaging with the community, but it's also showcasing their own talent. So write for yourself, maybe in this short run. Don't really stress about doing it for a living and writing for a brand or a person or a magazine or a publication. Just start writing for yourself. I think do that right now, even if it's a simple journal where you just write your everyday thoughts. Who knows, like that could become a bestseller someday. When for this crap, But yeah, write for yourself if you're a writer.
Super. Thank you so very much, Divyak. I think we have way extended our timing is what we promised you we would be consuming of. But thanks a ton for joining us. This was really very, very, very insightful. What we also appreciate is the fact about how you make it so rustic and raw and just bring out the true elements of what's to be spoken. We are also very happy to observe this trend in the industry where there's a lot of inclusivity that's being spoken of overall. There's a lot of positive body positivity that people are looking at. There's a lot of sustainability. The conversations are going about. And we really hope that once this lockdown is over, those values are truly embraced and are taken further by the industry as much as we understand you do. So thanks so very much for joining us. This was a lot of fun, a lot of knowledge for us. Sonam, is there some gratitude that you'd like to extend as well?
I personally just really enjoyed myself and thank you, Divyak. Thank you very much. I think I've had my fair share of questions and
I love your questions. We have to chat privately too. You're clearly someone I'd like to talk to more often.
Oh, same, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Divyak. And yeah, we hope that, we have many more master classes with you for our students as well.
I love that. Thank you, all of you guys who tuned in and who listened to this and hopefully gained something. I've gained a lot. Thank you for making this a very happy 1.5 hours for me. And yeah, we will connect digitally if you guys need anything or want to chat further. But thank you. Thank you.